Socialists, communists are becoming a problem in the USA. They're growing in popularity. And why is that? Well, Ben Carson has a take he wants to give you as to why this is happening and why something's not being done about it. Because our youth are being brainwashed. They're being indoctrinated. And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you some sources so that you can go ahead and educate yourself on the history of indoctrination, socialism, communism, and what it's done in the past. But before we get started, make sure you like, subscribe, comment below, and let's go ahead and see what Ben Carson has to say.
Let's bring in Ben Carson, former Housing and Urban Development Secretary and author of the new children's book, Built on Faith. Ben, it's Doctor. It's great to see you again. So these Democratic Socialist candidates, they portray themselves as of the working people. But according to Thomas Edsall in the New York Times, they are anything but. He wrote this: candidates aligned with the Democratic Socialists of America are surging to victory on the claim that they are proponents of a government by, for, and of the working class that will wrest power from both far-right Republicans and corporate Democrats. Here's the problem. Most of the leadership of the DSA and a majority of voters who back its candidates are in no way working class. Instead, an elite made up of well-educated professionals dominates this insurgency. What are you thinking about what we're seeing going on in America these days?
Well, it's not particularly surprising if you know a lot about history. If you go back to January 10, 1963, Congressman Herlong of Florida read into the congressional record the 45 Goals of Communism that came out of the book The Naked Communist by W. Cleon Skousen. He was an FBI agent. His entire career was spent studying communism in America. And it said that one of the goals is to gain control of the school system and the teacher unions. Another one to gain control of the media and Hollywood so you could change the culture in America.
I'm going to give you one of those sources I talked about earlier. One of the sources is a book called Manufacturing Delusion. It is by Buck Sexton. This book goes into detail how a group infiltrates the mainstream media, schools, universities, and indoctrinates and brainwashes entire civilizations. He goes into the history of the Soviet Union and Pavlov. And I mean, there's so many details in this book. I suggest you pick it up on Amazon. It's under $20, but it's something that you should probably look into. Now, there's even more resources than that, but let's continue here.
All of these things are very consistent with those goals, and they fundamentally want to change us from a country that is by, of, and for the people to one that is by, of, and for the government. Yeah. That's basically the interest and the argument that's going on right now. And we're particularly concerned about the children and how they're being indoctrinated. Even in America 250, over 300 books were evaluated by over 25 institutions for the children. None of them talked about our faith.
Think about that. Over 300 books were evaluated, books that are presented to children in our schools, our elementary schools. None of them had anything to do with faith. But there's a whole nother religion that they're more than happy to push onto your children. LGBT books, pride books, books about sexual immorality, something which God is against. Ever heard of Sodom and Gomorrah? So let me ask you, why is society so anti-Christian, so against just the moral principles of Christianity, but they're more than happy to provide your children with books about sexual positions? In my opinion, the only people that should be indoctrinating your kids is you. The school system should be there to teach you the basics you need to thrive in society. And colleges and universities should hyperfixate on those specific topics. But we've gotten to a point where your kids are being indoctrinated into various ideologies that are anti-American and anti-Christian because you have activist teachers and activist professors. And this doesn't even start with them. Where's the funding coming from? That's another question that the administration currently is trying to answer. But many of those sources we already know. Soros is one of them. The CCP is another one. But let's get back to Ben Carson and see what else he has to say.
None of them talked about our relationship of our founders with faith. They had plenty of room to talk about LGBT and indigenous peoples and how they're treated. But when the children are just getting a steady diet of this kind of thing, is it any wonder that we get to college and we have these radical exhibitions?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting to me, again, with this idea that the DSA says it's a party for the working class, for the disadvantaged in America, for minorities, which seem to be completely at odds with what the membership of the Democratic Socialists of America looks like. This is from their own survey. Look at this, the makeup of it. 85% of people are white, 9% Hispanic, 5% Asian, 4% black. Education, 80% plus of DSA members have a college degree. 35% of those have a master's degree, a doctorate, or some sort of professional degree. And in terms of jobs, 71% are white collar or other. 23% are students, unemployed, or disabled. 4%, only 4%. Are blue collar.
So the people who are supposed to represent the working class are only 4% blue collar workers. And then there's another stat I want to point out here. 85% of them are white. Why is that? Now I can go on and on about this, but let me just put it simply. For years, white people have been demonized in the West. White guilt has been growing. White guilt from crimes that their ancestors committed has nothing to do with them. So again, it's another form of indoctrination. And all this while ignoring where this leads to socialism, to communism, and not understanding what that means because they haven't been taught. But let's continue.
So this would seem to be an elite liberal arts movement masquerading as a workers' party.
Yes, the people who have been indoctrinated. They've drank the Kool-Aid and they're acting that way. And those are the people who are exposed to this the most. So we have to fight this vigorously. I hope the American people realize what we're up against here, because they need to study history. They need to study what's happened when socialists and Marxists take over. It's consistent. It always happens. Yep. People end up much worse off. You have an elite class that controls everything, and people are very sad that they went in that direction.
For people who don't understand the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism, I'm going to give you a quick breakdown right here. Capitalism is an economic system where private individuals or businesses own the means of production. Socialism is an economic system where the government or society collectively owns or regulates the means of production. Communism, a classless, stateless society where all property is owned collectively by the people. No private ownership. Now, usually in a communist society, by the people means by the state. But here's a little history lesson for people that don't know. The Socialist Soviet Union from 1917 to 1991 committed a mass purge, had a massive famine, gulags, executions, deportations of their own citizens into exile. Up to 62 million estimated to have died under socialism in Soviet Russia. China under Mao, up to 87 million killed in famines, purges, or just disappeared. Cambodia, from 1975 to 1979, up to 2 million people were genocided via executions, were starved to death and forced into labor. And there always seems to be a debate, well, oh, those were communist countries, not just socialism. That wasn't real socialism. Here's what communism and socialism share some commonalities. Both stem from the ideas of Karl Marx, of Marxism. Socialism is the broader umbrella, an economic and political system where the means of production are owned or regulated by community, state, rather than private individuals. The goal is reducing inequality. That's the goal. Communism is presented as the advanced or final stage of socialism, a classless, stateless, moneyless society where goods are distributed from each according to the ability to each according to need. And even Marx used these terms interchangeably. So communism is the end goal of socialism. So another good resource if you want to dig into this and actually educate yourself is The Devil and Karl Marx by Paul Kengor. You can get it on Amazon for 20 bucks. Another good book is called Suicidal Empathy, but that's another one that demonstrates the indoctrination and brainwashing of an entire generation to bring about communism. But I have a hot take on socialism that it could work. But listen, it's not what you think. In a perfect world, in a sinless world where people didn't have their own agendas, weren't power hungry, couldn't be corrupt, weren't prideful, weren't envious, didn't have their own ambitions, in a perfect world, sure, socialism could work, but we're not in a perfect world. This is a fallen world. This is a world awaiting Jesus Christ's return. And even if you're not of the faith and you don't believe that, you have to understand a government system under socialism or communism could never work as intended because people are people. We suck. Bottom line. So to the parents out there who have newborn children, educate your kids. Show them all the history, all the facts. Raise them to know all the history so that they can formulate an educated opinion as adults. Don't let the schools and other people indoctrinate your kids into radical ideologies. The history has spoken. Let's not repeat the pattern. With that said, if you like the video, subscribe. Comment below. I'm Noel. This is God in Politics. Christ is King. God bless every single one of you. I'm out.